My name is Olivia, and I begged my father to fire our housekeeper. I thought she was completely useless, because she couldn't understand a single word of English. But only a few days later, that same woman changed my life forever. Looking back now, I wish I could erase every impatient word I said about her. I was 23 years old, fresh out of college, and convinced I understood everything about the world. My father owned one of the largest commercial real estate companies in Chicago. We lived in a beautiful home with more rooms than we actually used, and I had never worried about paying bills or putting food on the table. It embarrasses me to admit it now, but I took that life for granted. Our housekeeper arrived every weekday at exactly 8 o'clock every morning. Her name was Elena. She was probably around 60 years old, though I never knew for sure because we couldn't have a real conversation. She spoke a language I had never heard before. It wasn't Spanish or French or anything I recognized. She couldn't speak English, and I couldn't understand a single word she said. Every morning she greeted us with the warmest smile. "Salam," she would say softly while placing her hand over her heart. My father always smiled back. "Good morning, Elena." She never understood the words, but she always understood kindness. I didn't. At least not then. The problems started with little things. I'd ask her to wash only the white clothes, and she'd wash everything together. I'd point toward the kitchen and ask her to clean the island first, but she'd start upstairs instead. One afternoon I asked her not to touch a stack of important design sketches I'd left on the dining room table. When I came home, they were neatly folded and tucked into a drawer. I spent nearly an hour looking for them. By the time I found them, I was furious. "This is impossible," I complained. Elena looked at me with worried eyes. She kept repeating something in her own language while pointing toward the drawer. I couldn't understand her. She couldn't understand me. We both stood there frustrated. That evening, I found my father reading reports in his office. "Dad, we need to talk." He looked up. "What's wrong?" "It's Elena." He sighed. "What happened this time?" "She doesn't understand anything I say. I ask for one thing, and she does another. I know she's trying, but this isn't working." He closed the folder in front of him. "What are you asking?" "I think we should let her go." He stared at me for a long moment. Then he quietly said something I never forgot. "She's a poor woman trying to earn an honest living. We can't take away her job just because she doesn't speak our language." "Dad?" "No, Olivia." He leaned back. "She's one of the hardest working people I've ever met. But she keeps making mistakes." "So have you." I frowned. "That's different." "Why?" "Because I understand English." He smiled sadly. "Imagine waking up every day in a country where you couldn't understand anyone. You'd make mistakes too." I crossed my arms. "But this is our home. It's her workplace. There's a difference." He shook his head. "No. There's only one difference. She doesn't have the luxury of quitting." I left his office annoyed. I felt like he cared more about protecting Elena's feelings than listening to mine. Over the next few days, my frustration only grew. If I asked for iced tea, she'd bring coffee. If I pointed toward one room, she'd misunderstand and clean another. Every interaction felt exhausting. The only person who never seemed bothered was my father. One Saturday morning, I watched him trying to communicate with Elena using gestures. He pointed at a broken picture frame. She nodded. Then she carefully cleaned the glass, wrapped it safely, and smiled proudly. They hadn't spoken a single common word. Yet somehow, they understood each other. I didn't get it. A week later, my father left for New York on business. It was just me and Elena at the house. Around noon, I decided to reorganize the storage room in the basement. It was packed with old furniture, holiday decorations, and dozens of dusty boxes. Elena noticed what I was doing. She quickly shook her head. "No, no." She pointed upstairs. I rolled my eyes. "It's okay." She stepped in front of me. Again she shook her head. She looked genuinely worried. I assumed she simply misunderstood what I wanted. "It's fine." I gently moved past her. She kept talking urgently in her own language. I ignored her. The storage room hadn't been cleaned in years. Boxes were stacked almost to the ceiling. I climbed onto a small ladder to reach one of the top shelves. The ladder wobbled slightly. I steadied myself. Then I reached for a heavy storage bin. The moment I pulled it forward, everything shifted. Several large boxes began sliding toward me. The shelf groaned. Before I could react, hundreds of pounds of storage containers started collapsing. I froze. There wasn't enough time to jump. Suddenly, someone grabbed the ladder with incredible force. Elena. She was shouting something I couldn't understand. One hand held the ladder. The other pushed me sideways. I crashed onto the concrete floor. The stack of boxes came down exactly where I'd been standing. The sound echoed through the basement. For several seconds, I couldn't breathe. Dust filled the air. When everything settled, I realized what had happened. The metal shelf had landed across Elena's shoulder. She had taken the impact meant for me. Elena! I rushed toward her. She winced but still tried to smile. Her arm was trapped beneath the shelf. I called 911. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped my phone. Emergency crews arrived within minutes. They carefully lifted the shelf. Thankfully, nothing was broken. But her shoulder was badly bruised. And she needed stitches where a piece of metal had cut her arm. At the hospital, I sat quietly outside her room. I couldn't stop replaying the moment she'd pushed me away. She'd known the shelves were unstable. That's why she'd tried to stop me. Not because she misunderstood. Because she understood the danger before I did. Hours later, my father arrived from the airport. The first thing he did was hug Elena. She smiled through the pain. Then he walked over to me. "Are you okay?" I nodded. "Barely." "What happened?" I told him everything. Every detail. When I finished, I whispered, "She saved my life." He put his arm around my shoulders. "I know." "No." Tears filled my eyes. "You don't understand. I've been so cruel to her." "You weren't cruel. I asked you to fire her. I treated her like she was a problem." He looked toward Elena's room. Sometimes we judge people by the conversations we can't have. We forget that actions tell a much bigger story. The next afternoon, I visited Elena with flowers. She smiled the moment she saw me. I didn't know how to apologize. Words suddenly felt useless. Instead, I placed my hand over my heart, the way she always had. Then I quietly said, "I'm sorry." She probably didn't understand those words. But she understood my tears. She reached into her bag and handed me something. It was an old photograph. In it, she stood beside a teenage girl who looked almost exactly like her. She pointed to the girl, then to herself. Then she slowly made a motion like someone falling. After that, she pointed to heaven. I looked at my father. He quietly explained, "One of the ladies at the hospital speaks her language." She helped translate. He paused. "That was her daughter." My heart sank. "What happened?" "Construction accident." I looked back at Elena. Dad continued softly. "Her daughter died trying to save someone when a building collapsed." I stared at the photograph. Elena gently touched my hand. Then she smiled. Even after losing the person she loved most, she had still risked her own life to save mine. Not because we shared a language, because we shared our humanity. Over the next few months, everything changed. Instead of speaking louder when she didn't understand, I started learning. My father hired a translator to help us communicate once a week. I also downloaded language learning apps. Progress was slow. Sometimes we'd laugh because I'd accidentally say something completely wrong. One afternoon, I proudly tried telling her the flowers looked beautiful. Instead, I accidentally told her the flowers were hungry. She laughed so hard, she nearly dropped the watering can. It was the first real laugh we'd ever shared. Little by little, our conversations grew. I learned she had left her homeland after years of hardship. She had worked multiple jobs to support relatives back home. Every paycheck mattered. She wasn't just cleaning houses. She was helping an entire family survive. One evening she surprised me with a homemade meal from her country. She carefully showed me the name of each dish. I taught her the English words. She taught me hers. Neither of us spoke perfectly. Neither of us cared anymore. Months later, on Christmas Eve, my father raised his glass during dinner. "I want to make a toast." He smiled at Elena. Family isn't always defined by language. It's defined by love, sacrifice, and showing up for one another. He looked at me. "I'm proud of both of you." I smiled at Elena. Then I stood and hugged her. This time there were no awkward misunderstandings. No frustration, no walls. Just gratitude. I used to think communication was only about words. Now I know it's about patience, respect, compassion, and the willingness to see someone's heart before judging their mistakes. The woman I once wanted to fire became someone I couldn't imagine our family without. She didn't just save my life that day in the basement. She changed the way I see people forever. Now, whenever I meet someone who struggles with English, I remember Elena's smile. I slow down. I listen. I show patience. Because everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter what language they speak. And sometimes the people we understand the least become the ones who teach us the greatest lessons.